Hi Year 5 and welcome back to another geography lesson. And this week we are looking at human geography. Well, what is human geography? Human geography is the study of people and their impact on the world in which we live. Today we will be examining human geography through 4 key areas. We'll be looking at settlements, water management, trade and demographics. Although human geography is distinctly different from physical geography that we looked at last week, the two are very much connected. In the Middle East, human settlements and human activity has largely been dependent on access to water for growing crops and drinking, and it's key to all aspects of basic survival. But it's also useful for fishing and trade and transport, whether this is done over the sea or via rivers. And in this week's video, you will see some of the relationships between the physical world and the human world. Settlements have always appeared where there is access to water. Think of the fertile valleys of the Nile and the Tigris and Euphrates, leading to the development of some of the greatest civilizations in history. However, settlements have also appeared where there are other important natural resources, maybe valuable things such as gold or silver or quarries, or even along important trade routes. Think of Aleppo at the crossroads of Asia, Arabia and Europe. Now, due to the vast arid and desert regions found in the Middle East and the relatively limited areas which had access to reliable sources of food and water, cities in the Middle East have historically been more spread out from each other, but larger in population due to the concentration of people migrating to live in these regions from the wider area. This pattern of settlement survives today, although in addition to cities, human settlement also takes the form of towns and villages, especially in remote and mountainous regions. There are also many nomadic people in the Middle East, such as the Bedouins, without a permanent home. Instead, they travel with herds of animals following water sources.
Well, the word Bedouin is a derivative of the Arabic word for nomad. They're an ethnic group known for roaming the deserts of the Middle East and North Africa, often with pastoral herds of goats and camels since as early as the 9th century BC. Today, many subscribe to the Sunni Islam faith. However, Bedouin culture is thought to predate the spread of Islam. Like many nomadic tribes, they live under a strict code of honor, which reportedly includes a form of lie detection that involves placing a hot spoon on the tongue of the alleged liar. They also have a well-defined hierarchy of loyalty, summarized by the widely quoted proverb, "I against my brother, my brothers and I against my cousins, and then my cousins and I against strangers." As nomads, the Bedouins historically thrived by protecting and operating desert trade routes. However, in the last few centuries, the Bedouin way of life has changed. With the rise of the Ottoman Empire and modern government's emphasis on land ownership, much of the land that Bedouins used pastorally was no longer available. Many clans had no choice but to settle down and become semi-nomadic. One of the most prominent Bedouin clans settled in the Negev region of what is now Israel during the late 19th and early 20th centuries. At the time, the newly formed Israeli government originally set aside specific land for the Bedouins. However, some groups settled on empty government property, sparking off intense territorial disputes that still continue today. Currently, there may be as many as 3 or 4 million Bedouins in the world, and the status of many of them, even outside of Israel, represents a murky political and social question. Many countries make efforts to preserve the ethnic group through aid programs, but they still face persecution and difficulty in gaining citizenship in some parts of the Middle East.
One of the other key features of human geography in the Middle East is the important issue of water management. The use and careful management of water is one of the main concerns of Middle Eastern countries. Therefore, the Middle East is home to some of the most complex water management systems in the world. This can include canals and water irrigation systems for transporting water and distributing it for crop growth, dams for saving and preserving water and preventing it from flowing downstream and into the sea, and desalination plants to reclaim fresh water from the sea by removing the salt.
Hi everyone! Nature is an amazing force that has been maintaining order and harmony on our planet for millions of years. Even the most insignificant element of nature has its meaning and purpose. Take, for example, rivers. They cross all existing continents and help people survive since prehistoric times. Rivers are a source of drinking water and food. Without them, it would be impossible to irrigate the land and carry people and goods from one settlement to another. Nevertheless, in order to live safely near deep rivers, we have to make certain interventions. For example, since ancient times, people were building dams on the waterways to adjust the flow of water.
Ending its journey in the Dead Sea, the Jordan River begins some 350 kilometers to the north in a mountainous region on the borders of 3 nations. 10 kilometers below the Sea of Galilee, the Jordan River is joined by waters from the Yarmouk River. The Yarmouk, whose major sources are in Syria, forms the border between that country and the nation of Jordan. Modern-day conflicts over both Yarmouk and Jordan River waters began in the 1950s, when the State of Israel began to take shape. To make the desert bloom, Israel needed water from both the Jordan and Yarmouk. From 1953 to 1964, Israel built the National Water Carrier, a complex of canals, pipelines and tunnels designed to transport water from the Sea of Galilee region to the coastal plain of Israel and the Negev desert.
Israel's got plenty of water, just not the kind that you can drink. At least, that's how it used to be.
We are taking water from the sea and making perfect drinkable water. We are removing the suspended solids, removing the dissolved solids, adding minerals and sending water to the country.
Historically, as it still does today, the Middle East has benefited from its geographical location. Nestled between the continents of Asia, Africa and Europe, it was a crossroads and a meeting place and a passing point for many people and important goods. The ancient Silk Road and transportation of exotic spices and materials led to the development of great cities in the Middle East, whereas today, the Middle East owes much of its expansion and development to its oil exports.
In 1980, His Highness Sheikh Rashid bin Zayed Al Maktoum signed a decree to establish Jebel Ali Free Zone, adding major trade and industrial areas to Jebel Ali port. His vision and wise leadership positioned Dubai as the focal point for Middle East trade. From just 19 companies when it launched in 1985 to over 7,000 companies today, Jafza has grown to become one of the largest free zones in the world, contributing to more than 20% of Dubai's total GDP. Ideally located at the world's crossroad, Jafza is strategically positioned to connect businesses to the world. Jebel Ali Port, the largest container port between Rotterdam and Singapore, provides unrivaled ease of connection. Dubai International Airport, the world's 8th busiest cargo airport. The region's extensive highway network, enabling goods to flow seamlessly to regional markets and beyond. And the imminent Etihad Rail, linking Jafza companies to the entire Arabian Peninsula. Today, more than 100 global Fortune 500 companies call Jafza home.
Southwest Asia has been an important crossroads for trade, religion, and culture for centuries. Though it is a large region made up of many countries, 3 cities have been important throughout history: Jerusalem in present-day Israel, Aleppo in Syria, and the port city of Istanbul in Turkey. From ancient times, merchants traveled the route between Jerusalem, Aleppo, and Istanbul in groups called caravans. Though all 3 cities are on Asia's western border and near the Mediterranean Sea, travel from Jerusalem to Aleppo and then to Istanbul could take several months. For thousands of years, caravans traveled to Jerusalem in order to buy wood and fuel for light and heat. The forested areas around Jerusalem were filled with trees, and tree traders wanted to buy as much wood and fuel as they could and sell it to people in their own countries. Much of Jerusalem's outdoor market, or bazaar, is little changed from the days when traders from Aleppo bought citrus fruit there. Traders paid for fruit or vegetables with gold. Merchants in Jerusalem still sell fruits and vegetables in the city's bazaars, but today's merchants also sell modern goods, like computer software and electronics. Traders from Jerusalem and Istanbul would travel to modern-day Syria to buy wheat in Aleppo's bazaars. They usually paid for it with gold and silver, but merchants also traded cotton, olives, and vegetables for the wheat. Aleppo's bazaars are still important places for trade. Olives, wheat, and cotton are some of the most widely traded goods in Aleppo, but modern-day Syrian merchants also sell crude oil to countries in Western Europe and the Middle East. Caravans had a long way to go from Jerusalem to Aleppo, but some traders went even farther than that, to the great city of Istanbul on the western coast of modern-day Turkey. Traders from Jerusalem and Aleppo in the 14th and 15th centuries traded gold, wood, and fruits for items found in Istanbul's Great Bazaar, especially Turkey's famous tiles and carpets. And while tiles and carpets are still sold in bazaars today, merchants also sell grain and fruit to countries in Western Europe. Traders from Jerusalem, Aleppo, and Istanbul have been buying and selling goods for hundreds of years. Trade still goes on in these ancient cities, but today's trade routes stretch across the globe.
The Silk Road wasn't actually a single road, but a network of multiple routes that gradually emerged over centuries, connecting to various settlements and to each other, thread by thread. The first agricultural civilizations were isolated places in fertile river valleys, their travel impeded by surrounding geography and fear of the unknown. But as they grew, they found that the arid deserts and steppes on their borders were inhabited not by the demons of folklore, but nomadic tribes on horseback. The Scythians, who ranged from Hungary to Mongolia, had come in contact with the civilizations of Greece, Egypt, India, and China. These encounters were often less than peaceful. But even through raids and warfare, as well as trade and protection of traveling merchants in exchange for tariffs, the nomads began to spread goods, ideas, and technologies between cultures with no direct contact. One of the most important strands of this growing web was the Persian Royal Road, completed by Darius I in the 5th century BCE. Stretching nearly 2,000 miles from the Tigris River to the Aegean Sea, its regular relay points allowed goods and messages to travel in nearly 1/10 the time it would take a single traveler. With Alexander the Great's conquest of Persia and expansion into Central Asia through capturing cities like Samarkand and establishing new ones like Alexandria Eshat, the network of Greek, Egyptian, Persian, and Indian culture and trade extended farther east than ever before, laying the foundations for a bridge between China and the West.
The Middle East has some of the largest oil reserves or also gas reserves, so hydrocarbon fuel reserves in the world. Exploiting these resources and then exporting them around the world is a major source of income generation for these countries. A lot of the development that we've seen in the Middle East is based on the proceeds of the export of these hydrocarbons.
Demographics. The people of the Middle East are extremely diverse, with a wide range of languages, ethnicities, and religious beliefs all being prevalent in the region.
Video is going to summarize the main languages, religions, and ethnic groups of the Middle East and briefly explain some of the minority ethnic groups. Where the Middle East exactly is and why it has that name could be its own video, but for the purposes of this video, the Middle East is a region at the crossroads of Europe, Asia, and Africa. It has no strict definition, but usually includes Egypt, Turkey, Iran, Syria, Iraq, Israel, Palestine, Lebanon, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Yemen, Oman, United Arab Emirates, Qatar, Bahrain, and Kuwait. Afghanistan and Cyprus are sometimes included in the definition, but those countries could be their own videos. Technically, every country could be its own video, but since the ethnic groups often span multiple countries, this video will put them in a broader context. Ethnicity is a complicated concept for when groups of people identify with one another based on shared language, religion, and cultural traditions. The main religions of the Middle East are Islam, Christianity, and Judaism. Islam is by far the most common religion in the Middle East, but most Muslims live outside the Middle East. The religious divide is accompanied by a language divide, with Iran speaking Persian and the rest of the Middle East, except Israel and Turkey, speak Arabic. Overall, the most common languages in the Middle East are Arabic, Turkish, Persian, Kurdish, and Hebrew, which can be split into 3 language families of related languages. Most Arabic speakers are Arab, but there are plenty of non-Arab ethnic groups which speak Arabic. Arabic originated in the Arabian Peninsula, and many minority ethnic groups exist in the rest of the Arabic-speaking world. In some cases, such as in the North African Maghreb, the local Berbers mixed with the Arabs, though the Berber language and identity still exists in some regions. In other areas, the local groups remain distinct, and they live alongside Arabs and have adopted the Arabic language for convenience. For example, the Copts are a predominantly Christian ethnic group living in Egypt that represent about 10% of the population. In Lebanon, most of the Christians are in a group called the Maronites, though other Christian groups exist.